Christian parenting.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast. We are Jeff and Tara Matson, a husband and wife team who is shrinking the integrity gap in our own lives and helping others do the same. I'm a leadership and organizational development coach, and Tara is a licensed marriage and family therapist.
We believe that if you have a following, you are a leader, and how you lead matters. Whether you are leading in the home, work, or community, we are bringing you biblical, clinical, and relational wisdom to help you in every relationship that matters most to you. None of us do this perfectly, but we are leaning into the reality of our humanity and profound wisdom of grace.
If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about relationships and marriage, two of our favorite things. Tara and I just celebrated 2 decades of marriage ourselves after dating for almost 4 years. Hey, high five for that.
Woo-hoo!
Oh yeah. Marriage is a way of refining us all. Emphasis on refining. Our guests today are going to share with us some of the lessons that they've learned along their way during their 20 plus years of marriage. And if you watch The Voice, you might already be familiar with our guests.
Todd and Brooke Tilghman are parents to 8 children. Having recently moved closer to Nashville for Todd's leap of faith to pursue music full time, they now live in Tennessee. From 2011 to 2020, Todd was the pastor of Cornerstone Church in Meridian, Mississippi. And he has the distinction of being the oldest winner at the age of 42. Wow, is that old? In the history of The Voice. Todd has been singing in church since he was just 8 years old, and he is currently writing and recording songs for his first album to be released this year. We're so excited to have both Todd and Brooke Tilghman with us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
We're excited.
All right. Well, we're excited too. And before we dive in, just tell us a little bit more about who the two of you are and how you ended up writing this great book, Every Little Win.
Okay. You want me to go? I can go first. So we actually met when we were just little kids, really. I mean, I think Brooke was 14 or so, and I would have been 16 or so. So we started dating then. I mean, it was a little bit of a rocky start. She wasn't really into me, but that's a whole other story.
Okay.
So we started dating really young, got married super young. She was 18 and I was 20 when we got married. And now, I mean, really a very long, complicated story made as short as I can make it. We've been married 22 years. We have 8 kids. We've had 2 adoptions. We've had a roller coaster ride of a marriage so far. And that's kind of who we are. You want to add to that, babe?
You did good.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty good at the things I do. So.
We could write a whole book on how I didn't like you when we first
That's true.
Well, you write in your book, we win as we discover that in God's economy, brokenness leads to beauty and scarcity to abundance. And you guys probably have a vast story in the midst of those 22 plus years.
Yeah.
And this is something believers say a lot. You know, it's very poetic to talk about God using our brokenness, but we know it's super personal to you both. Tell us really what's behind the statement. Maybe walk us through the season. You talk about Brooke being in a season of anxiety and depression and how Todd learned to walk and support. Let's talk about that part of your relationship first.
Sure.
You know, I like to always say that, Todd is my safe place. I think for the majority of our time together, dating or married, Todd has always kind of been like my safe place to land. And so for me, during that season, I think that's exactly what he was. But I will say, at the same time, in the tough parts, when I needed someone to say, Brooke, you can't quit. Brooke, you've got to keep going. Brooke, you have these kids to take care of. He was also that side. And it was a little tougher because I was used to him always being the kind of safe place, and he's the soft-hearted guy. And, it was a really, really tough season that seemed to go on forever while we were in it. It was really, really rough. And a lot of people are scared to share those seasons or those times in marriage where, when we marry, it's for better, for worse, the sickness and health. And I think a lot of times people, I know for me, walking through mental health challenges are ashamed. At times we're ashamed, especially in the Christian community, to admit that weakness and that brokenness. And so for me, I think Todd let me be me in that, which is the first time I hit it. The second time I was very vocal and shared, because if I was going to walk through it, I wanted to help someone. I told the Lord, I said, if I've got to walk through this again at this level, I want to have purpose in this pain. And for me, that was helping others. And so for me, that was beginning to talk about my story and share it. And Todd was so supportive of that. And, it was one of those things. It didn't happen overnight, but through people that loved us and through Todd supporting me and through doctors and medication and a lot of different things, that brought me out. And now I think he's used that for me to be able to help others that are walking that same path.
Oh, Brooke, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And we, on our podcast, we definitely love to dive into the deep end of the pool. We celebrate people's stories, and our stories ourselves are full of brokenness, and we're still becoming as well. And, you're right. For so long in the Christian community, I think there's a stigma behind dealing with mental health. It's not something you can see like a broken arm per se, or, an injury that has a wound or bandage on it. And yet, and culturally, the church at large, we're supposed to have joy as Christians, right? And we're supposed to be able to, be super positive and optimistic, because we have a God that's in charge of everything and everyone and is all powerful. But, he made us all, and he made these emotions that we got too. And I, just as a husband, as a father, as a person that's been around the mental health and also struggled with clinical depression myself early in my journey, I'm so glad that God has taken me on a journey to understand how he made me and to others, so that I could lean into the help that they could provide me as well.
Todd, how did you lean in and not turn away during those times? Because that's really difficult as a spouse when your spouse isn't able to be there and they're struggling with their own anxiety and depression. How did you lean in?
Man, honestly, through that time, I kind of cycled through a whole lot of different feelings. Like I would, at moments, I hate to say moments as if it was like really momentary, but like sometimes I would feel a lot of compassion, because this is my wife and I love her and the mother of my kids. And really basically, she's so much of my history, we've been together so long. And so there would be a lot of compassion. Then frankly, at other times I would be frustrated to the point of anger,
Mm-hmm.
because it's hard, because a lot of times, I know we've kind of covered this already, so I won't dig into it. But in the faith, a lot of times people have a hard time understanding that our spirit is different than our mind, and when you're dealing with mental issues, they're not necessarily spiritual; they're mental, And so when we were going through that, I would get really frustrated sometimes, and I would get into these. And honestly, I'm a little bit ashamed of it, but it's the truth. I would get into these kind of snap out of it moments, like, come on, snap out of it. We got all this thing. And I would literally say to her, look at what you're saying, and look, because it was really anxiety kind of that was focused in her certain areas, like her health and stuff. And I would say, look at what you're saying, and then look at what is actually happening. And those things don't line up. You have to see that this is not real. It's just a lie, So it was really, really hard. I tell people, man, all the time, I love passion, and I hope that I can have as much passion in my life for those things that I'm passionate about. But if I had to choose, I would choose commitment over passion any day. And I kind of had to choose that a few times in that season,
Appreciate that honesty, because that is true, that your own emotions as a spouse walking with someone who's struggling are real, and to the point of even feeling angry. Sometimes you're not understanding the depth of it, and it's more complex than we make it out to be. And yet your commitment, I think I heard earlier, Brooke, you talk about the fact that he stuck it out, and even to the point where he kept saying, keep going. So having somebody by your side to do that in the midst of those struggles sounds like a key part of your guys' journey.
Yeah, I think it's hard a lot of times when you have, a spouse that's struggling in an area that the other spouse doesn't understand or doesn't get. That wasn't Todd's struggle. And so I think, he would have a lot of patience, and then he would get frustrated because he didn't understand why I couldn't just snap out of it. And, we grew a lot there, having to have compassion on each other in those areas. And he did help me as well, because I did need someone to tell me. I think that's what eventually started helping as I couldn't quit. I couldn't give up. I had too much to live for. I had too much, going on. But I think that's one of the hardest parts in marriage, especially. A lot of times you just don't understand where each other's at.
Yeah, that's getting on the same page is hard enough just with one other person. And then, you could start adding kids to this mix. Oh, my goodness. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But I'd love for our audience to hear a little bit more about your young dating experience. I mean, in your book, you talk about being a young dating couple, breaking up for the sake of Christ, which I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Getting married, then being on the brink of divorce, reconciling, and then facing negative impact of social media on your relationship. I'm assuming that all exploded with Todd, your presence on the show, The Voice. And so maybe just share a little bit about that, in that space. Just you talk about the journey of your relationship really being themed as a roller coaster ride. We can relate to some of that, but speak to some of that.
Oh man, like I will say, Brooke kind of throws me under the bus with this one a little bit.
Okay.
Like when we were dating, I have to say, my background was I don't want to say fully, but there was a large part of my background that I perceived whatever they were saying, I perceived it as kind of legalistic, which kind of put me in this weird mindset where I always felt like I just couldn't do good enough or be right enough, or I just never felt like I was going to, meet those benchmarks, that Christianity had set for me. And I mean, God's freeing me from that now, but in that time, it wasn't really so much like, oh, I feel like I'm such a great guy and you're not a great girl, and so God wants me to break up with you. It wasn't really that. It was more like, and looking back now, I probably had just been conditioned and believed the wrong things. But it was more like I felt like Brooke was so important in my life, and I felt like something had to be wrong with that. Like I was putting her on a pedestal or something, and that something must be wrong with that. And so I broke up with her.
I think I always laugh about this because, especially when you're a young teenager, like I remember thinking like, that is so lame for you to blame it on God. That is so lame. Like, what can I say? Like, first of all, like, what do I say if you say God told me to break up with you? I do remember at the time, it was right when you first started getting called into ministry.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot on his plate, a lot of expectations. And I'm a little bit of a drama queen. I'm just going to be real. And I'm
okay.
to put it like
back
lightly.
in the day, I was probably even a little bit more so and immature. And I was a handful. I was a lot to deal with. And
you're talking past tense so much.
Yeah. I feel like I'm better though. I feel like I'm better. But so I think it was a lot of that rolled into. I was a little much, and you were trying to really focus in on his ministry and starting there. And I was kind of a roller coaster back then, and I had broken up with Todd several times. That was the only time Todd broke up with me, is when God told him to. But I had broken up with him several times. I was constantly changing my mind, constantly wanting to date other people. I think in a way that I think it was the right thing. I think it's what set us up where we eventually did get married. I still think it's lame. You blamed it on God, but I do think God was in it. I do think you were needing to focus on where God was taking you. And I was a big distraction. And I think, that's kind of how it went in that season. But we did end up together.
Yeah, here we are. Yeah.
We got married young. But you know what? The same roller coaster girl that was dramatic and changed her mind is who married Todd.
Right.
And I love Jesus, but I was a baby of my family, and Todd babied me from the get-go. So I was very spoiled and, dealt with selfishness, still have to work with that. Just with my personality, I've kind of, and honestly, going into marriage, it was great at first, because you get this.
Yeah, we didn't have that typical hard first year that everybody talks about.
Yeah, it was going into our second year.
It was like second, third.
Yeah, like I honestly bought into the lie that, the grass is greener. The same thing I kind of struggled with. I began to watch these romantic movies that Hollywood put out, and I'm like, I don't have that. And, I should have dated more people. I got married too young. I began to feed into all that. I began to hang out with single people. And just really took me down a path where, I thought I wanted out, but I still wanted to be friends, I was like, let's just be friends, And
I was like, that's going to be a no for me.
Yeah. But that's how immature and young I was. And, but it got pretty rough.
Yeah.
Families were involved.
Well,
You
skipped over the part that you filed for divorce.
I did. I filed for divorce. We had a 2-year-old son.
Wow.
Because we got pregnant pretty quickly after we got married.
Yeah.
There was a lot thrown at us, and I still had a lot that God needed to work out. And thankfully, I had praying family and a church that supported me and loved me at my worst, and a husband that still believed in me.
Well, I mean, you ended up putting in the work too.
I did. And Todd will even say, and I'll let him share his part, that he felt like, he was kind of walking a mediocre walk, and he kind of allowed the enemy. He was the head of the ship, and he allowed me to do things that he shouldn't have been allowing me to do in a marriage, going out and things I was doing, simply because I think he was scared I would leave.
Or I don't really. Brooke always says that. I hate to put it that way because we don't have that kind of marriage where like I allow her to do things.
Well, I mean it more of you didn't have any objections.
Right?
You kind of let things go on that probably should have been out of fear. I think that I was going to leave.
I really have kind of always struggled, even in marriage through the years with this. And in pastoral ministry as well, with like the idea that we're a team, but I'm a leader, so I don't really know, I don't want to be a boss man or a king, and so I never really have known how to balance that, and that was really a lot like that back then too. I was not leading well.
And I'll be honest, and I couldn't put the blame on this. I tried to put the blame on this, but he wasn't perfect. Because you were young, and and his big thing was he didn't want me to be upset at him. So if he didn't pay the bills right,
we didn't have any.
He would hide it from me, and then make up excuses. And so we had some issues going on there financially.
We did.
A big deal, but I couldn't put all the blame there. The truth is, I had bought into a lie, and I was being selfish, and I was thinking about me, and I decided that I wanted to go live and I guess sow your oats or whatever, wild oats. And I had kind of made up my mind that's what I wanted to do, and that God would forgive me and he'd send me someone else that was amazing. That's so naive and stupid how your mind thinks. But that's kind of where we were at.
That's not so stupid, though. God is good.
He is.
Well, you guys,
he uses it all.
He uses it all here. And as you guys are describing this, again, the word commitment comes to play. And commitment is not a soft word. It means something to you. As I'm hearing you describe the level of chaos, and I would say searching, and you used the term being young and immature, and I mean, you had to struggle through that journey together. Now, many people that report, so many of our audience are going to, be listening to this, and they may be in their start of their relationship, and they've had maybe 1 or 2 bumps, and it's been a major deal for them. Mm-hmm. Speak to them for a second. That the persons that are in relationship, and they just had 1 or 2 bumps here, and they want to give up. What would you say to them right now, especially if they're followers of Christ? Oh man, I would say I always say to people. In any committed relationship, whether it's a marriage or another in your church or whatever you're doing, there's always going to be this wedding atmosphere for a little bit where there's cake and people are taking photos and throwing, there's rice or sparklers or whatever. But then after that comes the marriage. And I would say to them, number one, remember, we always say this, please remember that you're on the same team. Even if you disagree, please remember that you're on the same team. Number two, please rely heavily on the grace of God, because the thing about it is, if a lot of us, I certainly don't want to like blanket everybody in the world, but I know we did it. Of course, we were very young, but a lot of us go into it with this mindset of how things are going to be, and we have this picture in our minds of how it's going to be, and it's just not like that. And so then we feel like we've failed when it's not like that. But that's really not the truth. I mean, even the scripture never says a righteous man doesn't fall. The scripture says a righteous man falls 7 times and rises again, And so it's, hopefully I would tell them, don't base your whole marriage and your whole relationship on this one really bad time, even if it's really, really bad,
And I think, I would tell them, marriage is any relationship, but especially marriages, they ebb and flow. If you're in a down season or you're in an ebb season, it's not quite flowing. If you just hang tight and be committed, and that season of flow is coming. But also, I know for me, I deal sometimes when I don't like my reality, I tend to want to fantasize about what it could be like. And then that can lead to bad, it going somewhere else. And so for me, the Lord is starting to show me, like, Brooke, you avoid the reality of your life sometimes because you don't want to do the hard work. So you turn to fantasy or thinking about, ooh, what would it be like if I just, checked out and found somebody else, it'd be easier, or whatever you're going through, whether you're, trying to lose weight or whatever. Sometimes we don't, want to deal with the reality because it will require something of us and it's going to take some work. And I know I struggle with that. And if you're out there listening, just, hey, I've heard a million times the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time.
That's right.
Take one step, to you have to live in your reality. And even no matter if you're even in a tough spot, just one step, do one thing different. I found in marriages, like if you can just carve out any time, you don't have to have money. Because I know a lot of us sometimes don't have financially. We've been in those places where you can do a date night. Go sit by the pond, do a date night at your house. If you can find a way to just realize that you really love this person and the things you love about them again. And sometimes that takes some like deep work and conversation, and that doesn't take money. That really helped us get back on track a lot of times.
And also remember, like, not to be cliche, but vision for what's next in your marriage kind of comes from the mountaintop. You can't see until you get there, but you can't get to the top of the mountain without the climb, and right. that can be hard. And so that's kind of, I've always said what's on the other side is better than what came before if you don't give up in the middle.
So good.
Deeper love does come if you stick it out.
So two things I heard you guys say. I mean, so many really powerful principles in there, but two, one back was boundaries. I think you guys were talking about, Todd, you weren't able to maybe articulate some of the boundaries maybe that you would have maybe now in your more mature relationship. And I would say that is a key factor that I hear you guys kind of alluding to, that a lot of new couples or even seasoned couples haven't really established what they're both comfortable with in the marriage. And I'd love us to touch on that, the four of us, maybe like talk a little bit about what are some of those boundaries now so that you can live in reality. That was the other part, Brooke, that you spoke to, is that it's women do fantasize too. Men often get pointed in that direction, but our fantasy life can look different with movies and the idea of how romance is supposed to look or what a marriage is supposed to look like. And so living in reality can be hard and good. What are some of the boundaries you guys have set into place after all these relationship years that help you keep focusing on each other?
Oh, man. It's weird because a lot of them I wouldn't say are like stated, but we do. First of all, we don't have any that I can think of, any more of those. Like, we consistently go out and spend time as if we were single people. That's not that you can't go out with your friends now and then. I go out with my friends now and then. Brooke goes out with her friends now and then. But now, after all this time, 99% of them are married anyway.
Right.
We're pretty old. But that is one thing that we did back in those days. And now, though, I will say we've never talked about this, I don't think.
What?
But I would say even in today's world, it's a lot different than it was when we first got married. But like Brooke, I don't know that this would be a boundary as much as just, a respect. Brooke knows the password to my phone, and I don't really care if she gets a hold of it,
Right.
You know what I mean? It's fine. And we don't really do those kinds of things. We don't, and also we are very intentional about spending time with one another and having, we actually just had one like this week, having really hard conversations when we start feeling, maybe one train car going off the rails a little bit,
We've had seasons in our marriage too where there was a particular people that were causing issues in our marriage, and we had to kind of put the brakes on that as far as it don't have to be the opposite sex. Sometimes it can even be.
It doesn't even have to be romantic.
That was causing a lot of issues, and we had to kind of put up some boundaries there. And I remember that was a hard season for me because it was a close friend of mine. And, so there's just in different parts of the marriage, sometimes you have to rediscuss those boundaries. And what's, ultimately the most important relationship in your life after God is your spouse. And so if something is harming that or coming between that, you really do have to reevaluate and set boundaries there. I'm a little bit old school in the mentality, but I don't think guys and girls, can be like best friends if they're not met. I struggle with that. I think that's just opening the door for trouble. I mean, you can have friends of the opposite sex and colleagues and people you hang out with, but those people that you got to call and talk to and hang out with on a regular basis, if, to me, that's kind of a boundary for me.
And also another thing,
and we're having to learn because stepped out in this new,
it's a new world.
World. He does have to operate a lot with a lot of different people.
One other thing we do very different though is Brooke and me. We have to figure it out is we parent very different.
Oh yeah.
And so that's an area we have to find some
set
middle
boundaries
ground
and what works for us and what works for him, and like kind of meet in the middle. And then too, like I just know recently with your new, the way your new season of life. If something's a little weird to you, if you feel like something's a little uncomfortable with, interaction, you'll send it, you'll text me.
Oh yeah, I'll tell Brooke right away.
I just want to let you know, like, I don't know, this happened.
This lady was acting weird.
Yeah. and I like that because I feel like that, that's ways that, in this new season, and we didn't encounter that quite as much in the church, but a little bit.
A little bit, not as much.
And I just think being open, communicating, sharing where you're at, because marriages and relationships changes. What was boundaries in the beginning of your relationship when you're younger or you may be older just in your marriage, but they change over time. You have to some are going to stay in place, but some are going to shift and change as your seasons, change in life. So I think it's just really, you have to communicate and, but I think boundaries are healthy for all relationships, so you do need to set those.
So good. There's so many pieces, and we're a little old school as well, if we want to call it that. But I was just saying that, I think, was it to you, Jeff, or to someone else? I was like, it is something that's super confusing right now in today's culture, is that it's normalized that you can have best friends, while you're married, and have a best friend with someone outside of the marriage that's of the opposite sex. Of course, we want to have best friends or have friendships outside the marriage. You don't want to have that be the only case, but it's a danger zone when it's a hole in your boat that you're leaking and giving energy outside of the relationship. And so I appreciate that.
I tell people all the time, you have to be really careful, because if you're going through a tough patch in your marriage and someone else starts meeting that need,
someone's going to break that fall.
Yeah. And you could be somebody you think you totally don't like, and then all of a sudden, and so it's just a danger zone. And I just wanted to add, stop it, Todd. I just wanted to add too, with social media now, it is so much easier to get yourself in trouble. So I do like the fact that Todd gives me his passwords and he lets me look. Like I can pick up his phone. You don't jump or, it doesn't matter. I don't think I've
ever just reached over and tried to snatch my phone.
I don't ever look, but because I know it. Like it's I trust him and I know I can, and so I don't But I mean, I think it's just you do. It's a new world. We're in a new world. Social media. There's just so many more boundaries that you do need to talk about and set, and people can have different ideas, and you got to come together on that.
Well, it's the truth. And what we love, I'm hearing in your guys' both of your voices as you're sharing as a unit, a team, is that team mindset that you protect one another. You've had all this history and it's worth protecting, and you do it in simple ways and you do it in practical ways. And Tara and I have the same mindset. They just think that there's just some good rhythms in our lives that we can put in there. Simple things like, knowing our passwords, and for me, it's less about my phone, although she has my password phone too, but it's more about TV. And it's like that she could go in and for things, the filters we set on our, dish programming. It's like, I just don't want to go to places in a weak moment. So we protect one another in relationships, and in, that we could be safe people to people of the opposite sex that are friends in our lives. I want to be a safe guy to Tara's friends and friends that happen to be female. But part of that is really not going to places with those people that I would ever go with Tara emotionally or any other aspect. So appreciate that about you guys. And Todd, you were a pastor, and then instantly famous after winning The Voice. And we just want to talk a little bit about this. It's amazing the way that God takes us from strength to strength. And for many, they look at these roles and think, wow, that's incredible. And there's this celebrity aspect that you've been living in as a couple and you as an individual from your experience there. What do you know now that you wish you would have known before you became a pastor, let's say, and then had to shepherd through so many of these cultural stressors that you've had since winning The Voice?
Man, one thing that I gotta say, I wish I would have known 20 years ago or even 10 years ago is that, and I this seems like common sense, but clearly for me it was not, is that, man, God loves me and he wants me to pursue the things that I'm passionate about that fulfill my spirit, because I struggled a lot of years feeling like I had to do certain things. And now I got to say, I don't despise my years as a pastor. I don't regret them. I don't feel like I was in the wrong place, but I do feel like, and I don't blame anyone but myself, I do feel like my mind was in a place of pleasing people and working really hard to try and please God. And so now I've told 100 people, if I've told one, there's just so much freedom. And I've found so much freedom in this where I am now. As far as, it's funny because everybody asks me what's it like to be famous. I'm like, well, if I run into somebody famous, I'll ask them and then I'll tell you.
Yeah, right. That's a good answer.
For example, when I do news interviews, I would say about, no kidding, probably 8 out of 10 of those at the very end of those interviews always say, is there anything you would like to add? And I always add the same thing. And I would say this is probably at the top of the list with all of this. People have just been so good to me. And I just really am so very grateful for that. And that's really one of my major takeaways from all of this, is that people you know and people you don't know will rally around you and just make your inner man, your spirit, feel victorious and fulfilled. And a lot of people have played a huge role in this. And so I tell them all, like, I sang the songs, but y'all won the voice, y'all did the voting and making up fake emails and stuff. Y'all did all that.
I like to say, like, I feel like in a lot of prayer time that I've prayed about it, I feel like God is kind of impressed on my heart that God has used this. I always say he used the grand gesture of the voice because Todd is a play it safe guy.
I sure am.
To kind of, push him to move in the direction. And I think the reason for that, I believe, is God wanted to bring freedom to Todd. There was a lot of, like, his own mind, I think, brought him himself growing up. And his dad was a pastor growing up in the Deep South and some religion that was very,
is a real thing. It really is.
Legalistic. I think God wanted to bring a lot of freedom to Todd's spirit. And I just felt like, because I struggled when he first started talking about it, even way before the voice, he was shifting to not want to pastor anymore. I thought, well, it's got to be sin. If you quit pastoring, like, how is that not sin? And God had to work on me. But in the process, God really showed me I'm using this to free Todd so he can fully be who he is in me. And then I'm going to launch him into what I have for him. And so I really feel like that's what God's doing. And that's why I've had such a peace about it. And I'm excited. And I see that freedom. I see that fruit. So I'm excited.
I love that. I think it's such a great picture of God's grace and his, how he just delights in his children and he wants us to be free, to be all he designed us to be. And that is such a journey that you're attesting to of feeling like you had to please people and please God to a place of freedom to just be able to do something really fun. And yet I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer. This is just, I always ask the hard questions, but when it comes down to the end of the day, how are you guys going to make it the long haul? Because, it's a lot of pressure, a lot of eyes, a lot of, what keeps you two grounded and keeping, that your first love in the midst of all of this fun? Because it's exciting. I hear that excitement from you both.
One thing that I think is that we still see first, of course, we rely on God 100%, but I guess we still see each other as the only certain thing, because this, for as much excitement and freedom as there is in this journey that we're on, it's really scary, man. It's a faith walk,
Yeah.
It's probably not a good joke for me to make, but I make bad jokes all the time. So I kind of tell everybody I wake up every morning and I sort of lay in the bed and have my daily dose of severe anxiety, because I don't know, is it going to work? What about this? And what about the finances? And what about this? What if, 6 months from now, no one cares, at all? And so, and here we are out here in the lurch in a way. And so I think we sort of look to one another as the foundation and to God.
Yeah, I feel like definitely, God first of all. But I think each other, but also our kids keep us grounded. I have a huge connection still with our church community. I have a lot of ladies there that were like spiritual advisors to me. They really helped me. And we're actually getting a new community here in church. Church for me and the community of church has always been so vital. I'm so relational, and I've always had my pastors have always been family members. So honestly, I've always looked to other people in the church. I've had those connections where they poured into my lives, because it's a little different if your husband's your pastor or your father-in-law is your pastor. It's a little different than
Sure. Yeah.
So I've always learned to reach out and have those connections in my church community where ladies, older ladies, or ladies that were just more mature than me in the faith poured into me and let me be myself. And that was the thing, is even a pastor's like, they let me be me. And
that's huge.
Those connections with people that let me be me, let me be open, because I'm open and I share what I walk through. That keeps me grounded. They keep me grounded. I really think that community, alongside my husband, and then all of them point me back to Jesus.
It helps a lot that we are clearly small fish in a giant pond.
Yeah, it all points me back to Jesus, and then and our children, we still wake up and, have wild and crazy kids.
Our 17-year-old son said we need to write a book called Every Little Loss.
Leave it to the 17-year-old.
He's right.
They keep us grounded. They remind us. They keep us humble.
Our kids keep it real, don't they? And and that's a huge thing for Tara and I as well. Here we have this organization, Living Wholehearted, helping leaders live with integrity. And you want a bullseye on your back, just name a company and start a company that with that line and tagline. And so, we do want to keep it real, and we do want to live in that dynamic tension that we are broken. We need the grace of God and Jesus Christ in our lives, helping us to do real relationships. And our kids, if we, you guys probably feel the same way. You could change the world and, on the big stage. But if your kids don't like you because you're a jerk to them, then we failed. And if your wife or husband, if you're married, your spouse doesn't want to be with you and they feel alone, we failed. And it's like, we need each other. We need to keep centered, keep focused, keep the main thing. It sounds like that's a kind of a theme you guys have done, even the ups and downs. Try to keep the main thing. And that's God's good love for us and his help practically in our journeys. And may we keep doing that. Finish strong. Gosh, it's a pleasure to have the both of you on our program today, the podcast. And thank you for joining us. Your willingness to share your story, get under the hood of your guys' lives and relationships, and that makes I want to go back and watch the season that you won, Todd. My huge fans, and it was fun to see now some of the pictures, and I remember some of the ways in which the program got into your home, featured some of your kids and you guys together. I want to see your faces again that way. So maybe we'll do that. And then, if you ever want to find us out here in the Pacific Northwest, we'd love to see you and spend a little time out this direction if you get this way.
Oh, we would love it.
Absolutely.
We would love it.
Well, all right. Hey, so tell our audience where to find more information about you and about this, your special book.
All right. For the book, you can just go to everylittlewinbook.com, and that's where you'll find everything sort of book related. If you want to order the book, the audio book will be out. Of course, there's like Kindle versions and all the things.
We read the audio book. So
yeah, we actually read the audio book ourselves, so you can listen to that just to make fun of it if you want to.
Good.
And then for us, we're out there on social media. Our name is spelled weird, but I love to say right now, in this point in history, however you spell it, you can probably pull us up. I'm Todd Tilghman on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, iTunes, all those things, all the things. Brooke is Brooke Tilghman, but she pretty much sticks to Facebook and Instagram. She hadn't really released any songs on Spotify.
I'm waiting for those, Brooke.
All right. So that's how you can find us.
And spell that last name so everybody can make it easy.
It's spelled Tilghman.
Yeah,
it's pronounced Tilghman. I don't know. Who knows?
Yes, look us up. I love to follow along on other people's journeys. I love hearing other people's stories, so I would love that.
You are. You're so relational, Brooke. I love it. And it's so good. So we're all on this journey with you. And if you're listening and you're somewhere in one of those seasons that are really hard, whether it's struggling with some mental illness or you're just in a really dark place in your marriage, I hope you just heard that like there's seasons and getting help and getting other people to walk with you, encouragers, mentors, counselors. That really is a huge part of their story. We didn't even get a chance to talk about their 8 kids. We all know as we're listening that that's a whole story in of itself, but it's in their book and you can follow them and learn more of all the things through their adoptions and raising those children. We're so grateful.
And if you're interested in learning more about becoming a wholehearted leader, a leader who lives and leads with integrity, we'd love to walk with you. And Tara and I, along with our executive coaching team, are walking with a small cohort of leaders over a 2-year period. And if this is something you're interested in, the application process opens again on August 1st for our January 1, 2022 Wholehearted Leadership Cohort. Go to our website, livingwholehearted.com, to apply. And until next time, may God bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you. May we stay committed to him and to one another in our important relationships. This podcast is powered by Living Wholehearted, Courageous Girls, and the Christian Parenting Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us in this critical movement of shrinking our integrity gaps between what we preach and live.